when I look back on your career, you kind of, you're an Australian that comes over to the US and you kind of immediately get into the media world, it seems like. But your initial work at like Fox News and some of these other places, it was kind of like this like celebrity coverage, like pop, like not TMZ, but you would almost
Pop
put it in
culture,
that category. Like, how do you, I mean, that was your foot in the door, I'm sure.
Sure,
you do what you got to do when you're starting off.
I wasn't even 20.
But how do you, it's like you go from that to immediately like the next year you're in war zones.
Yeah.
There wasn't this gradual transition where you like go to like serious news report, serious news journalism, and then you go reporting. It was like there's very much I'm covering what's going on with J-Lo one day, and then I'm over in life and death situations.
Yeah. So actually, there's a little bit more behind the scenes, but yeah. So technically, I was
probably
based,
watering it down.
Yes. So I was based in Los Angeles, so just sort of doing lots of different stories. But by, I guess, virtue of being in LA, we did there was a lot of entertainment, which definitely was great training ground because I was, again, very young, 20 years old, and had this great opportunity to work for this network that was sponsoring me. But it was a great training ground in the sense that you learn to cut through the bullshit very quickly. And so, you're sort of surrounded by these kind of A-list people. And I guess I look back at it now and you're invited to like all these very cool places. And I look back at many different situations I've been in, from Diddy parties to, being on a private jet with, Demi Moore and Paris Hilton to, I don't know, just all these things, which I just didn't give a shit about, I guess. And you also learn to cut through the bullshit. So when, there's often layers of people and I think I was pretty brash at the time because I didn't care. And, you really just had to cut to the chase to get the story. But having said all of that, I was also sort of thrown into the deep end of a lot of these investigative stories at the time. I think because I was young and Australian and just very unassuming, I could extract a lot of information from people that were very oblivious to, and I was good at that, I guess. So that really showed my bosses that I was very versatile. So I think that they put a lot of trust in me because of that. They, realized that there was a lot more that I wanted out of my career, and that I could, certainly do other things. And then I'd traveled a lot on my own, just as a young woman. And so I sort of was writing pieces from, different places that I was traveling to. And then, I guess that's sort of just how I kind of got started. And I was able to prove myself, I think, very quickly, and ended up, I guess, on front lines very early in my career, not by necessarily planning it, but, by just having contacts, and that's how things worked out. So it was very much a baptism by fire, I think, in the beginning of my career, being in Syria, being in Iraq. And that it just kind of, once I started doing that work, that it felt so important to me, that was all that I wanted to do. And again, thankfully, I had bosses, one boss in particular who's still a good friend of mine. He's retired now, but who just believed in me. And that's what it really takes, I think, is that one person to believe in you when everybody else will just look at you and think, well, she's the young entertainment girl. What does she know about, a conflict? But I think I remember just treating it like that it was totally my lifestyle. And I remember just reading everything that I possibly could, reading every possible book of history and every sort of foreign policy trade magazine, and just immersing myself 24/7 in trying to really understand these places that I was going to and visiting and covering. And it was, you have to throw yourself totally in the deep end, and recognize that it's a total lifestyle job. It's not a 9 to 5. It's not something you can just do a little bit, then check out. And that, especially in the beginning when you're trying to get your foot established, that it takes everything. And that's, I think I was at a place in my life. I was young. I had the time and ability to be able to do that. And really, you have to prove yourself in that way. And that's what I did.
What was your first conflict reporting trip? Like, what was your first day in a war zone?
Yeah,
like?
so I covered some Syria. That was kind of my first. I guess covered's not the right word because that was more working on my own things that I was doing just to learn. But my first kind of work with Fox was Iraq. Mm-hmm. So that was like 2013, and then ISIS happened, and so that I was sort of in the very beginning, and really kind of stayed there for the next sort of 5 years, going in and out. And that was really my focus in that part of the world. And then Afghanistan came into it, and then Yemen, and then just kind of really broadening from there. But sort of Syria, Iraq was my early, yeah.
So what were some of your early stories that, trying to establish yourself on the ground? This is your first time in a war
lot of
zone.
my time, a lot of the work that, I was doing. I remember in the beginning, I guess right after that ISIS takeover, being, on a front line with a bunch of Kurds that was not far from Mosul Dam. And so that was sort of that was the beginning of a lot of conflict, I guess, so to speak. So that was very much... in the line of fire, I guess, and interviewing ISIS prisoners. And I think I was really one of the first Western journalists to have that kind of access to do that. Mind you, they were prisoners. They weren't, in the wild. I did interview ISIS a little bit later in the wild, but so that was very much when we were trying to figure out what this group was and what it represented. And so that to me kind of felt like I started to figure out what I was doing a little bit. And so that really became, I think, something I felt very focused on and wanting to understand. And there were just so many different layers to it, I think, at the time. And when I was first there, the US had already, years ago, end of 2011, had withdrawn from Iraq. So the US presence wasn't there in the beginning. And then slowly over time, you started to see the US kind of coming back and supporting the Iraqi military. And then you're sort of trying to understand there's so many different dynamics of like Hashdu Shabi, which was sort of the Iranian-backed militias, their role in this, the role of the Kurds, the role of the Iraqi army, the role of the Americans and the rest of the coalition. And then also trying to, again, understand the ISIS point of view. And I would go on to interview as many different, fighters as they could and their families and just cover it, I think, from as many angles as I could. And that's where I really felt like the US was lacking in media coverage, was that we're really only seeing it from one particular lens, or we're seeing things, or we're trying to frame things in very black and white terms. And it's so much more nuanced than that. And so that's really what I was trying to understand. And I just felt like if I didn't understand a lot of this stuff, then certainly, the American readership wasn't going to understand a lot. So it's sort of in some ways, you're a translator, trying to translate sometimes a very difficult situation in a way that people can understand, but they can also grasp that it isn't as simple as we would like it to be. And so I felt that trying to sort of cover those angles was really important.